So Silent Hill 2, I've been thinking about this game for weeks now, and I can't get it out of my head. Not because it's scary, though it is, but because it understands something about grief and guilt that most stories don't even try to touch. And it's been 23 years since it came out, and people are still talking about it, still making video essays, still trying to unpack what the hell James Sunderland's deal is. Because, on the surface, it's simple. Guy gets a letter from his dead wife, goes to the town they vacationed in. Weird stuff happens, but it's not about the monsters or the fog or even the town itself, really. It's about why we can't let go of the things that hurt us, even when we know we should, even when holding on is killing us. Let me try to explain why this game sits so heavy. The letter that shouldn't exist. James Sunderland receives a letter from Mary, his wife, who's been dead for 3 years. "I'm waiting for you in our special place." That's it. That's the setup. And James just goes. Drives to Silent Hill, walks into the fog because some part of him needs this to be real, needs her to be there. Even though he knows, on some level he has to know, that this doesn't make sense. But grief doesn't care about sense. The game starts with James staring at himself in a dirty bathroom mirror in a public restroom, just standing there, looking at this exhausted, hollow version of himself. And then he walks into Silent Hill and the town immediately starts warping around him. The fog rolls in. The radio starts picking up static, reality becomes negotiable. And you realize pretty quick that Silent Hill isn't just a spooky town, it's responding to him, to what's in his head. Everything he sees, everything he encounters, it's all built from his guilt and shame and the things he won't admit to himself. The town isn't punishing him, it's showing him what he already is. Guilt disguised as love. James says he loved Mary, says he's there to find her, and I think he believes that. But as you play, as you find pieces of the story, you start realizing it's more complicated. Mary was sick, terminally ill, for years, and James took care of her, watched her deteriorate, watched her change from the woman he married into someone angry and suffering and trapped in her own dying body, and he resented her for it. Maybe he even hated her sometimes, not because he's a monster, but because he's human and humans have limits. And that resentment, that exhaustion, he can't forgive himself for it, can't accept that he felt those things. So now that she's gone, he's rewritten it in his head, made her into this perfect memory, made his love pure and his grief noble. But the town won't let him keep that lie. Pyramid Head shows up, this huge triangular-headed executioner thing that just exists to hurt James, kills other monsters in front of him, corners him, won't let him rest. And people have written entire analysis videos about what Pyramid Head represents, but it's pretty straightforward. It's James's need for punishment. It's what he thinks he deserves, a walking, hulking reminder that he's guilty and he needs to suffer for it. And Maria looks like Mary, but she's not. She's dressed differently, acts differently, flirts with James in ways Mary never did. She's his fantasy. The version of Mary who wouldn't have gotten sick, wouldn't have suffered, wouldn't have made him feel inadequate and exhausted. She's the escape he wanted when Mary was alive and couldn't admit to wanting. The game kills her over and over, makes James watch, because he can't have the fantasy, he has to face what actually happened. What actually happened? The game makes you work for this, pieces it together through notes and dialogue and environmental storytelling, but eventually you get there. James killed Mary, he smothered her with a pillow, because she was suffering and he was suffering and some part of him, some terrible exhausted part, wanted it to be over. Maybe he told himself it was mercy. Maybe he even believed that. But it wasn't just mercy, it was also relief. Relief that he wouldn't have to watch her die slowly anymore. Relief that he could stop being the caretaker. Relief that he could have his life back. And that's what he can't forgive himself for. Not the act itself necessarily, but the selfishness underneath it. The fact that he did it partly for her, but also partly for him. And he can't untangle those motivations, can't figure out if he was a loving husband making an impossible choice or a coward who gave up. So he buried the memory, rewrote it, told himself she died 3 years ago of her illness, convinced himself so thoroughly that when he gets the letter, which doesn't exist, which he probably wrote to himself, he goes looking for her, like she might actually be there, because letting go means admitting what he did, and he can't do that. So he stays in the fog, literally and metaphorically, stuck in this liminal space between denial and truth. The noise of a mind not listening. Everything in Silent Hill is James's guilt made external. The static on the radio that warns you monsters are near, that's the noise in his head, the fog that makes it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. That's his refusal to look at reality clearly. The mannequins, the lying figures, the flesh lips, it's all sexual shame and repressed resentment and the body horror of watching someone you love decay. The town doesn't have an agenda, it's not evil, it's just a mirror. A really accurate, really cruel mirror. And James keeps fighting through it looking for Mary, but he's not actually looking for her. He's looking for absolution, for proof that he was good, that he loved her the right way, that it wasn't his fault. But Silent Hill doesn't give absolution. It just shows you the truth and asks what you're going to do with it. You can't love what you resented. I think the real tragedy of Silent Hill 2 isn't that James killed Mary. People do mercy killings, that's not unique. The tragedy is that he couldn't love her properly while she was alive, and now he can't forgive himself for that. When Mary was sick, James pulled away, emotionally, maybe physically. He went through the motions of caregiving, but some part of him had already left, and Mary knew. There are tapes you find, recordings of Mary when she was still alive, and she's angry, she's cruel. She says things like, "I'm disgusting, aren't I?" and "You don't love me anymore." She's lashing out because she's dying and scared, and she knows James isn't really there with her. And James, he couldn't handle that. Couldn't be present for her suffering, couldn't be the perfect husband, so he retreated into himself. And now that she's gone, he'd give anything to go back, to be better, to love her right. But you can't. That's the thing, you can't go back. The mistakes you made with someone, the ways you failed them, those don't get fixed after they're dead. They just sit there, permanent. And James is trapped in that permanence, in the knowledge that he wasn't enough and now he'll never get a chance to be. Letting go feels like betrayal. People say, let it go, like it's simple. Like grief is something you can just decide to move past. But when your grief is tangled up with guilt and shame and love that was never quite good enough, letting go feels like giving up, like saying, okay, I failed and I'm just gonna walk away from that. For James, moving on means admitting Mary is gone, really gone. Not waiting for him in Silent Hill, not sending him letters, just dead. And it means admitting his role in that, his selfishness, his limitations as a person. That's not something you just decide to do one day, that's an impossible ask, so he doesn't. He stays in the fog, fights the monsters, chases Maria through endless hallways, suffers, because suffering feels like loyalty, like penance, like proof that he cared. Guilt disguises itself as love all the time. You stay stuck because moving forward feels like dishonoring the person you lost, or admitting you're okay without them, or accepting that the relationship wasn't what you wished it was. James doesn't want to let go because letting go means facing the truth, that he wasn't the good man he needed to be, and Mary suffered for it, and now she's gone and he can't fix it. So instead, he builds a prison out of his own guilt and walks into it willingly. The endings and what they mean. Silent Hill 2 has multiple endings depending on how you play, and they're all heartbreaking in different ways. In the Leave ending, James accepts what he did. He reads Mary's full letter, the one she wrote before she died where she forgives him and tells him to move on and live. And he walks out of Silent Hill with Laura, the little girl who loved Mary. Maybe he'll try to be better. Maybe he'll raise her. Maybe he'll learn to forgive himself. It's hopeful, kind of. In a maybe healing is possible, but it'll take the rest of your life way. In the In Water ending, James can't do it, can't accept, can't forgive himself, so he drives his car into the lake with Mary's body in the back seat, chooses to stay with her, chooses eternal guilt over the possibility of moving forward. And that ending doesn't feel wrong, it feels tragic but earned, because some people can't forgive themselves, some wounds don't close, and sometimes the weight is too much. There are other endings too. Weird ones where Maria replaces Mary, or James leaves with Maria, or UFOs show up. But those first two are the real ones, the human ones. And they both make sense because grief isn't logical, guilt isn't rational. Some people find a way through and some people don't. The game doesn't judge either choice, it just shows you both and lets you sit with them. Silent Hill 2 came out in 2001. Graphics are dated, controls are clunky, combat is awkward on purpose to make you feel helpless. But the emotional core, that hasn't aged at all. Because it's about something everyone eventually faces, loss, regret, the gap between who you wanted to be and who you actually were when it mattered. And how do you live with that? How do you move forward when part of you wants to stay stuck? Because at least being stuck means you're still connected to the person you lost. Most games about grief make it neat. You go through stages, you heal, you get closure. There's a moment where you say goodbye and then you're okay. Silent Hill 2 says no. It's messy, it's circular, you lie to yourself, you punish yourself. You build monsters out of your shame and then fight them and win, and they come back anyway because you can't kill your own guilt. You can only decide whether to keep carrying it or put it down. And putting it down doesn't mean it goes away. It just means you stop letting it define you. James spends the entire game looking for Mary, but she's not there. She was never there. The only thing in Silent Hill is him and his guilt, and the question of whether he can forgive himself. That's it. That's the horror, not the monsters. The realization that you're trapped by your own inability to let go. And maybe you never fully do. Maybe some wounds just learn to breathe with you. Maybe you carry them forever, and the only choice is whether you let them drown you or just exist alongside you. I think that's what Silent Hill 2 is really about. Not redemption, not healing exactly, Just the quiet, painful process of learning to live with what you did and who you were, and accepting that it'll never be okay, but maybe you can survive it anyway. Mary's letter at the end, the real one, says, "You were always kind to me, but I wonder, were you only kind?" And that doubt, that question, that's the thing James can't escape, because he doesn't know, and he'll never know. And neither will we. All we know is he's stuck in Silent Hill, in the fog, in the static between truth and denial, and the only way out is to stop running, to look at what he did, what he felt, who he really was, and decide if he can live with that. Most days I think about this game and I don't know, man. It's a video game about a guy in a spooky town fighting weird flesh monsters, but it understands grief better than most films or books or therapy sessions. It understands that love and resentment can exist in the same space, that you can hurt someone and still mourn them, that guilt can feel like the only proof you ever cared, and it doesn't offer easy answers, doesn't promise you'll be okay if you just work through it. It just says, this is what it looks like to be trapped by your own heart. This is what it feels like when letting go is impossible, but holding on is killing you. And then it leaves you there, in the fog, with the static, with the choice. Some games you finish and forget. Silent Hill 2 finishes you and doesn't let go. And maybe that's the point.